Well, one of the things that was happening in those days was the demonstration against the getting ready for war stuff, where they would have a day and everybody had to run,
Yep.
you know, to the subways and stuff. What we did, we had a special demonstration on that day, and we refused to leave the park, you know, and
City Hall Park.
yeah.
This was in the
So people
60s
like
sometime?
who's the Catholic worker, or what's the lady's name?
Doris Day?
Dorothy Day was
Dorothy.
there. Yeah, Dorothy Day was there, and they would always haul her off to women's prison there in the village by 8th Street, west of 8th Street. You know that jail there.
There was
And
a
then
jail,
we would
yeah.
go up and demonstrate. So that was one of the goodies. Was all you had to do was stand out in the park. And, you know.
It was the easy one.
Yeah. Do the civil disobedience.
And you potentially see the mayor's office people. I mean, you at least see people who are in government making.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you were in a building. I don't think you have to leave the building. And you just, if you were in the street, you had to leave the street and head for cover. Mandatory.
Well, I don't understand. What was this mandatory run? What?
You had to get
well,
underground.
it was war, right? A war play. Okay, so the bombs are coming, right? What do? Well, you got to protect yourself. So you got to run down in the subway.
This is a subway scare thing, or like a Red Scare time? It was like 50, 60, 62, 63?
Yeah.
Or later?
Yeah, earlier.
Okay.
Yeah. 58, 59, 60.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah.
And they would do a drill and you weren't allowed to be out on the streets?
That's right.
And the cops could arrest people who
Yep.
were like not playing
Yep.
along with the oh no we're scared, let's run away thing?
Yeah.
I still don't get that. It's like, really? Last time I checked, unless it's 12 o'clock at night and you're under 18 and there's a curfew,
It could
they
have
shouldn't
been,
be able to arrest you.
you could have been nuked, okay? Don't you have a right? You don't have
So,
a right to
that's what they're
be
concerned.
don't have a right to be radioactive?
Well, if I want to stand outside when the nuke's dropping, that's my prerogative.
But if you would stop, drop, and roll, you could have been in the same position as everyone else when your permanent shadow was made, and it would have had more of like a elegance to the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Instead, there's a gap in the pattern. You're off frolicking somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
All the other desks have their little hovering, quivering,
Skeleton.
meat on a stick. Glowing at night. So yeah, it was right down the street from like City Hall. So you guys did stuff at the mayor's office?
No.
How many years was this? You're talking like Purvis bought it in 57?
Well, we got the boat, and in 1960 was Bradford Lyttle came from Chicago, where his homeland was, and he came into New York and set up an office there on Grand Street. I don't remember, Grand Street, on the north side of Grand Street, second floor. There were loft buildings there, and we had a loft building. That was the center of and so the idea was to have a march from the United Nations all the way up to
I just came up with the
New London, along Highway 1.
Bigger, we have to find a way to
Highway
hide it
1 went
from
along
these
there.
guys.
There was a super highway, but we didn't bother with
Why
that.
don't we build
It
a
was
false
main-
cabinet that we just slide over the top of it?
See as many people as possible.
Cabinet.
Do you remember seeing the first Center for Nonviolent Action flyer in the newspaper or something? How did you connect with it? Or you went to meetings and people announced it?
Well,
It was more like who you knew and people...
I started college in 1950. It was just west of Chicago. And my friend Leroy,
Not quite, because when the cops were
which
through
you
school, they
met,
found pot seeds.
and I were kind of like, we pretty much
when the
did
police came
everything
to remove the lock from Sean's
just to
room
get an
and
idea.
everything, go through that
you know,
whole procedure,
Test everything,
they
test
found
the water
They
everywhere. So
actually
we
like
went
they
to
found seeds.
all the
They figure
different
out well.
religious stuff, and then we
We
went to
went to
all the
Tony's
different
From what I
anti-war
was
stuff.
told,
And there
when the
was
cops came, they
Bradford
the cops
Lyttle's
found pot seeds. in
Friends
his room.
Meeting House was on 57th Street on the south side,
Exactly.
and Woodlawn.
Kenny said that
And
when
we
the cops
used to
went
go
his
to
room, they
that
found pot seeds.
regularly. And then we hooked on.
Kenny's usually a pretty reliable
We
source.
had a
I'm not
professor who was
cookie, I'm not-
anti-war, who was sociology
I'm
professor.
asking for like.
And so we
I don't
kind
know
of got
specifics,
hooked
you have
up
to talk
with
to
all
Kenny.
of this stuff that he knew about over the years, you know. And so one of the
I'm
big
thinking about
deals
installing
was
the
in
new
World War
speakers
II.
that were all
There was
beginning
this
underneath the
group
seats.
of people who absolutely flat refused to go into the military, right? And they all went to jail. But
Mhm.
when they came out, let's say there was 100 of them in the United States. I don't know how many. It might
The rest
have-
of them escaped to Canada.
and so they formed this organization, which was like, you know, you sit there in jail for the war years, right? And you say, wow, this is what we should do, you know, and
They had time to stew on it and cook up.
yeah. So there were just a lot of people who started all kinds of stuff, magazines.
I think that's a bad idea.
Some
I
of
think
these
that's a
guys.
bad idea.
One of the first things that
No, it's a bad
that
idea.
was
because
felt
they're
across
comply.
America was the thing
entire
of
book
riding
line
buses to enforce the law which had already been
Put a
passed,
leash on the
that
bird.
there had to be equality and justice, and they couldn't the interstate law said that any interstate bus had to abide by reasonable stuff, and so that you couldn't tell the blacks to go to the back of the bus in an interstate bus. You could do it in the city bus, like down south. You know, you could go there because they had different rules. But it's just cross the state line. That meant that you had to abide by the interstate set of laws. And so they got onto the bus, which hadn't been enforcing it, and they made them. You probably know the stories when they got to Montgomery or whatever the capital of
Alabama, right? Yeah. Yeah, this was the Freedom Rides?
Yep, Freedom Ride.
And they were coordinated from New York or all over?
Yeah, and they were started basically by these guys from World War II that refused to.
And that was the War Resisters League, or what?
No,
What group was the
that was.
the
That was
conscientious
another.
objectors?
It was a nationwide group, and people kind of pulled together, and so Leroy and I got into their swing of things.
Right.
Now I'll have to think of things.
So
Peacemakers.
Okay,
They
so
called themselves peacemakers.
so peacemakers were the conscientious objectors
Yep.
group,
Yep,
and they
they were-
organized the Freedom Rides.
It was a superb organization.
And-
Really a principled organization, but they didn't have like national offices. What connected them was a Peacemaker magazine, which came out probably every 2 weeks, something like that. It was more than once a month. Maybe it came out every week. But it was just like an 8-page magazine, you know, nicely done by some religious nut who operated, I think, Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh area.
A Quaker.
No, he wasn't a Quaker. He was
Could you not watch those now? I'm trying to get good audio here, Zach.
some other Christian group, and he had been in jail in World War II, and he got out, and they started Peacemaker magazine, and that was.
And you had it sent to you, or?
Yeah, he just connected with it, and my sociology professor knew about it. And, you know, we moved on, and we started meeting some of the people in the Chicago area that were involved in it. And one of them was Bob Swan, who was a builder, conscientious objector in World War II, served 2 or 3 years in prison. I think he was in Kentucky, one of the Kentucky federal prisons.
As a Quaker?
No, he wasn't a Quaker.
But a conscientious objector.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of them weren't Quakers, but some of them were. And there were Amish too that were in this. There were Mennonite, Quaker, and the Amish were the three religious groups that did most of the anti-war in World War II.
And so Peacemaker came out every 2 weeks?
I can't swear to that, but I can look around and probably find some old Peacemaker papers.
That'd be great. I'd love to scan them and get them back to you.
Yeah. Well, you can go to the Library of Congress. It'll be in there.
Yeah, Bradford Lyttle mentioned the Library of
Yeah.
Congress as a great way to keep
Yeah.
records.
He with
Was he involved in-
CNVA was
Yeah.
his organization, Committee for Nonviolent Action, and it was just another one, but it was really a lot of the same people that were in the Peacemakers and other anti-war groups and war resistors leagues. I mean, when we had a organization meeting, there would be people come from Peacemakers, people come from War Resistors League, and people come from Committee for Nonviolent Action, and they overlapped. You know, there's this guy named A.J. Musty. You know the name?
I do from when we went to the 50th
Yeah.
reunion.
Yeah. Well, he was getting old when I came in. He was getting really old, and well, he had his own stew made up. He had an office down just east of City Hall Park in New York City, and I was there a couple of times. And anyway, he used to work with Committee for Nonviolent Action. In fact, he was probably more the head of it than anybody else. So I ended a lot of people didn't like him. You know, he was a boss.
Cantankerous or...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but he had...
Whereas Bradford was more quiet and more of an idea guy.
Yeah.
The idea guy.
AJ was, probably had been communist for many years.
Yeah.
And he spent time in Russia and, you know, with the Russians, stuff like that, and a lot of people didn't dig that. And when I was in Danbury after...
Was there a lot of ideology or was it more about action? I mean, how
personality.
Personality stuff, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And were there women involved? Was
Oh,
it
yeah.
like 50-50 almost?
Yeah, I'd say pretty near 50-50. But the management, you know, was the male thing, in those days, everything run by anti-war people was more or less men.
The loudest. Was there some attempt to include everybody, or were they running?
Yeah, there was some attempt, but women got left out by and large.
Were there people of color in New York?
Yeah.
And this was in 58 through 60 something that we're talking mostly?
Yeah. There were a number of. It was integrated. It was integrated, but the numbers of blacks in groups were, 10 to 30%, depending on what group.
So
Something like that.
could you go into the history as far as you know it of the Freedom Rides? And Seth's mom was part of that, right? The Freedom Rides or
No.
the voting stuff later? Yeah.
No, it was voting stuff later. That was in the I'd say 63, 64
Was
that they got into this stuff with voting rights.
The Voting Rights Act didn't happen until 65?
I think it was 64.
Okay.
But even so, I mean, like even today, there isn't justice in terms of the Voting Rights Act. There's efforts to wipe out the black vote by pulling strings here and there, And so the same thing was happening in the 60s. Like after the Civil War was over, you said, well, now everything should be taken care of, right? And so for a couple of years, they allowed blacks to run southern stuff in southern states, and then some president came along and said, "Screw that! It was dependent upon enforcement from Washington, you know, that there would be justice, and then so along comes let's say a Republican president. I don't know the details, and he say, heck, I don't care about that. Let's you know,
Look the other way while that state
and
discriminates.
then as you know, the Democrats pretty much ran things in the South, and if they ran it through the white Democrats in the South, you know, and the blacks weren't Democrats. They more or less didn't do anything, weren't allowed to do anything.
Yeah, they weren't in it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the freedom rides were then initiated from some of these groups, these pacifist groups in New York.
Well, yeah, it was more. What was the name that they gave that organization?
Peacemakers.
Peacemakers. It was more peacemakers that started the freedom ride than it wasn't the war resistors league so much.
Through articles in the Peacemakers magazine, or making a case for it, and did they propose it or was it organic?
It's like, say, I used to know the 5 or 6 people that were in Danbury Federal Prison during the Second World War, and these guys were like a crew. You know, they worked together. They kept tabs, you know, from being in prison together, to each other. One guy was an educated guy. I mean, college educated, and he produced a magazine called Liberation Magazine. You ever hear that?
But it was someone who had been locked up for some years.
Yeah, he had been Dave Dellinger, his name was. Dave Dellinger was a college graduate, sophisticated guy, and he had a commune out in New Jersey, near the Pennsylvania line, and from that place he produced the magazine, and it was all over the United States, probably internationally too. Liberation Magazine. He did a lot of stuff going to Cuba and connecting with people down there. In fact, he had some kind of a medical problem, and when he needed an operation, he went to Cuba and got it done, because he could get it done free, and Cuba was perfectly happy to support this, what this guy was doing.
That's fantastic.
Sure.
So you knew Dave Dellinger personally?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit about him, what he was like. And
Well, you should get the magazine.
Yeah.
From the
Well, I'd love to just
Library of Congress or
his
whatever.
personality, like what you think made him tick or work, or what you liked about him, or.
I was in Danbury.
Yeah, let me get that guitar out from behind you.
I was in Danbury starting about January '61, and for a year, and there were guards there.
Yeah.
And they would ask me if I knew certain people, right?
Yeah.
And one of them was Dave Dellinger, right? Dave Dellinger had been the pitcher for the a softball league that they had in the in the prison.
Yeah.
And so they, what was it? Let's see now. He was in prison in 44, 45, so this was about 61, so that's about 17 years later, but there was still guys that remembered him. And there were other people too, but that's the one that prison guards would remember was a softball guy.
He was older than you?
Yeah.
And did you ever go to the commune?
Briefly, when Jerry Lehman and I were looking for a place to put the commune, we went all around New York City to a distance of 100 miles looking for inexpensive land. And this here was the cheapest land in the whole circle. Right? We went out in western New Jersey to see if we could find anything, and the land was much more expensive.
But
We got that 97 acres for $24,000, which is like $400 an acre or something.
Yeah.
And it was cheap.
That was Pine Plain, Satyagraha?
Yeah.
And And Jerry Lehman stayed involved for.
Yeah, Jerry
How long?
Lehman may still be alive, but last I heard he's living in Poughkeepsie.
He was a Catholic worker person, or
Well, he was born Catholic, but he wasn't particularly Catholic. But he was very Christian oriented, and of course that caused a problem in the commune after years. He was kind of like the daddy Warbucks of the commune, because he wanted it to work, and he put up the money and he organized the people. So after a while, he had done projects like being a missionary to Mexico and help poor people to get organized in Mexico. This was before I knew him, in I'd say the mid-50s, something like that. And then he did the walk to Moscow. He walked all the way from San Francisco to Moscow.
he was there the whole
With the
time?
exception of the oceans.
They didn't walk along the ocean floor?
No, none of that.
Did he ever write about his time there?
Yeah, he wrote a book about it.
Jerry Lehman did.
Yeah.
Do you know what it was called, or?
Yeah, we could probably find him and get a copy, get a loan to the book.
Oh yeah, we should definitely have that at the library.
I never read the book.
Really? Did you?
I was in jail.
You wanted to be there.
61.
Yeah, you were there the whole. You were in jail.
I
the whole time.
would have been in the walk to Moscow, except that I was
Were you
in
keeping?
jail for.
Were you able to get articles about it or happening, or people? You had people you were writing with, right?
Oh yeah. There was a bunch of people I was in jail with in Danbury. What happened was there was two of us who swam out, and this was in November 22nd, and the election for president with John Kennedy and Richard Nixon running against him was on the 6th of November of that month. And like politically things were changing in the country. We had been doing all kinds of stuff without getting arrested. We didn't mind getting arrested, that wasn't the problem. It's just I'm telling you that things started happening, and Kennedy, after the 6th, was then the heir apparent to the new presidency. And so it like made changes in what people did. You know, like the guards at presumably were re-educated based upon the fact that Kennedy won and Eisenhower was going out. Eisenhower did not press things about civil disobedience. You know, he just more or less let it slide. What the heck? You know, just some more kooks, right? And
Well, he's a general. Yeah, he's coming from.
yeah, and so
He
somebody
agreed with a lot. Of it.
made things change, and so they started arresting us after that for doing stuff. See, even though Kennedy was, you know, only, you know, a voice in the future. What was in January he would be in, right? So it was still another 2 months before he got in, but they were already changing their working policy. And I had been in maybe 4 different submarines climbing over them, you know, over the years, and they were just like an electric boat. We had this thing in June or July of 1960, where we came up in rowboats. We told them what we were going to do. It called Openness and Truth was the name of the thing. We always told them what we were going to do. Well, we were going to be nonviolent, that we weren't going to resist, we weren't going to cooperate, and so it was, you know, we came up to the dock, and we didn't know for sure whether they were going to shoot us dead, or whether, you know, they were going to let us sit there. And so we climbed onto the dock at an electric boat, and each guy got 2 guards, one on each side of him. And they grabbed us and they walked us away.
How far did you get? Like you went from the rowboat onto the thing, or you went
Yeah,
to the dock?
yeah,
to the dock?
it was like
Did it cross like
3
a 40
feet
foot?
from the rowboat. 3 feet from the rowboat, they grabbed one at a time. We got onto the dock, and they grabbed us and walked us into the factory. they kept on walking us for about a minute, and they brought us out to the street side, which was on the east side of the factory, the opposite side of the factory, and where we used to picket, with signs on that side. They brought us out on the street and said, "Okay, you're free to go." And they just didn't want to bother. They wanted to get us out of the factory, but once we were on the street, we were no longer a danger to them. But we didn't know what was happening, whether we were going to be charged with serious crimes or what.
And it was security guard? Did they have to hire?
Security guard, right? Just regular factory security guards.
How many would be arrested at a time?
How many did we have? Well, we
Like
didn't have,
June
the
and
first
July and
time
stuff?
when we went, there were 4 or 5 people. And I was one of them, and Bradford was one of them, and I don't remember the other guys' names, but they were guys from around New England.
And so I saw the bulletins, the CNVA Polaris bulletins with the updates throughout the
Yeah.
year. So there were actions throughout the whole summer of 1960 into the fall.
Yes. We started. I remember I got there about March into Grand Street place where we had meetings, and I just stayed there, and we did everything we had to do, got ready for the march. And then Harry Purvis came along and he said, "Hey, I want to do this other project. I got a rowboat here, and we're going to row from the United Nations, and this will be a symbolic connection between what the United Nations would do and what's happening up at Electric Boat." And so we got 3 guys, Harry Purvis, me, and a teacher from a college on Long Island. And we rode during the time that the guys were walking up on Highway 1.
Right.
They'd walk about 15-20 miles a day. And we would row 10 or 15 miles a day and then find a place to sleep for the night. Now, Harry Purvis lived on Long Island, so we spent one night at his house. But we would just make arrangements with the peace groups up along the Connecticut shore there and go to somebody's house for the night. And
People just called ahead? I mean, it's not...
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we were ready. All of the people on the march were going to somebody's house, or maybe a church basement or something like that,
So that was all planned in those weeks, weeks
it was
before the march?
Step-by-step plan, all the way.
Was it like one person took charge of that, or how did that happen?
Well,
From you were talking about some of how these meetings went. You said it was like kind of like the men would be most vocal, but then everybody got tasks or circles or committees or groups, or how did the work get done between meetings?
well, that would be Bradford Lyttle's oversee job. He came there like 2 weeks before anything was happening, and he set up. And one of the things he did was collect cars. He would have people give them cars, and of course they sent out the bulletin. People would say, "Oh, I got this old car. It says been running good, but, And then so he collected, in the 2 weeks, he collected about 5 cars. So he would have enough cars to run the walk. And I remember when I came in, like I hitchhiked from Chicago. I lived in Wisconsin, and I did everything without any money. I had hardly any money at all, right? Maybe I'd take $5 with me if I had it when I was going from Wisconsin to New York. So I got there like in the middle of the morning, and he says, "Oh, what you doing?" "Oh, okay." So he said, I knew him, I had met him a couple of times. I knew who he was. I knew how he operated and stuff. And so we went in this second floor loft, and he says, "Okay, I got this thing here. I'm collecting cars, and I want to get these cars fixed up so they'll be in shape for our march." He says, "Okay, I got this car here, and it needs paint. I found a place out on Long Island where I can get a good deal on the paint job on this car." He says, "Your job," he's talking to me, "is to drive it out to this place on Long Island, and then we'll give you a few bucks and you catch the Long Island Railroad back to the city and you come back. And so it took me about a day to figure everything out, and he told me how to drive on what roads and where to get off what exit and all that sort of stuff, which, you know, I had never lived around New York. I didn't know nothing, but I just did what he said and it worked. Took the car over to the guy and dropped it off and walked over to the Long Island Railroad and took it back, I think, to 33rd Street there where the Madison Square Garden is now. Yeah. And then figured out how you can catch the, I don't know what they catch. I was a fabulous hitchhiker in those days. You could do anything hitchhiking. And I had already been to Alaska and 48 states and
Whoa.
hitchhiking everywhere. And
What would you do to be successful hitchhiking? People weren't scared of you? How did you clean yourself up a little, or just like keep your smile on, or?
I had a little bag and I used signs. And I had this stuff to make up new signs as I went.
Well, mark
Like Chicago, you know, just simple sign. And
Would you walk too, or would you just pick a
yeah,
spot?
sometimes you walk. You walk to get to the best spot to hike, right? Or red light's a good spot to hike, you know. But
Where people are already stopped.
you know, or when you get dropped off, you're driving along. The guy's going this way, and you say, "Hey, I got to go that way." So you get up to the junction, and you stand at the junction on the road where you're going to, and you put your sign out. You just keep waving it at people.
Near the intersection where people can pull over.
Yep, that sort of stuff.
What about at night? Would you try to hitchhike at night, or you?
Yep, I hitchhiked 24 hours if I felt like it, but in my little bag, which only weighed about 5 pounds, I had a small sleeping bag. And so I was an expert on finding places to sleep.
Like under bridges?
Cornfields,
Oh.
old abandoned cars. You know, it rains sometimes. The big, what do you call those things where the roads come around for an intersection?
Oh, underpass?
Grassy knolls on the side, in the center of the loops.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be highly visible? But
Sometimes you didn't give a damn. I slept in the snowbank. I slept in one of those grassy loops, and a state policeman came up to me and said, "Hey, just checking to see if you're still alive."
nice.
And I left it like that, and I go under railroad bridges and
But I mean, never near tracks, right? I mean.
oh, you always had to figure out, like if you were in a garage, you know, somebody you dropped off by a gas station garage or something like that.
Right.